prepare. I've been watching Veep.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The 2014 U.S. Senatorial debate between Republican Congresswoman Shelley Moore Capito and Democratic West Virginia Secretary of State Natalie Tennant. This debate is sponsored by AARP, the West Virginia Press Association, West Virginia Metro News, and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Here is your moderator, Hoppy Kercheval.
Good evening, and I'm pleased to welcome you inside the Walker Theater at the Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences for this 2014 United States Senate debate. Tonight's event is presented by AARP and the West Virginia Press Association and its member newspapers in partnership with the Metro News Radio Network and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. And we welcome our viewers on C-SPAN tonight. During the next 60 minutes, you'll have an opportunity to hear from the Democratic and Republican candidates for the United States Senate in their own words, as we discuss many of the issues important to West Virginians and their families. Tonight's debate includes an opportunity for you, the voters, to engage in the discussion on social media by using the hashtag WVSenateDebate. By way of formal introduction, seated to my left is Secretary of State Natalie Tennant, the Democratic candidate for the United States Senate seat currently held by retiring Senator Jay Rockefeller. Secretary Tennant was sworn in as West Virginia's 29th Secretary of State in 2009 and re-elected in 2012. She's a Marion County native, and she attended WVU, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees and represented the school as the first female mountaineer. Prior to her election as Secretary of State, She worked in West Virginia television broadcast media for more than a decade and was a co-owner of a video production and media training firm she operated with her husband, West Virginia State Senator Eric Wells. They are the parents of a daughter. To my right is Congresswoman Shelley Moore Capito, the Republican candidate. Congresswoman Capito is serving in her 7th term as U.S. Representative for West Virginia's 2nd Congressional District, a seat she was first elected to in 2000. A Marshall County native, Congresswoman Capito attended Duke University and the University of Virginia. She's a senior member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Financial Services Committee, where she's the chairwoman of the Financial Institutions and Consumer Credit Subcommittee. Prior to her election to Congress, she served as a 2-term member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, representing Kanawha County. She and her husband, Charlie, have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. To begin, each candidate will get 2 minutes to deliver an opening statement. A coin toss before the debate determined that Congresswoman Capito will deliver our first opening statement. Congresswoman Capito.
Thank you. Thank you, Hoppy. Thank you for moderating tonight's debate. And I want to thank the sponsors of tonight's debate, the West Virginia Press Association, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and the AARP. I want to thank Secretary Tennant for being here with me. But most of all, I want to thank the viewers at home, our fellow West Virginians who are interested and want to know about the future which this election will hold in 2014. You know, West Virginia is at a turning point. For the last 6 years, our economy has been under assault by the policies of President Obama. I've traveled this state through this campaign, north, south, east, and west, seen folks who have lost their jobs, folks who are worried about losing their jobs, people that can't pay their health care premiums. People are really concerned about the future of this state. We clearly need a change in the United States Senate. I'm running to be a senator from West Virginia because I firmly believe that West Virginia's best days are ahead of us. We have an enormous, vast natural resources, and we have so many people who know the value of hard work. My West Virginia Works plan, I think, will help us reach our potential here in West Virginia. I will continue to fight for West Virginia coal. I think we need to use our natural gas resources to invigorate our manufacturing sector, and we need to make sure that West Virginia's citizens, older and younger, have the tools and the education they need for the 21st century economy. But this race is about West Virginia's future, a future whether we're going to continue to have Washington pick winners and losers, of which we're losers, or are we going to elect a United States Senator that is going to stand up and fight for us. I decided to run for the U.S. House because I believe I have the experience and the practical way of solving problems that we need in a dysfunctional Senate. And I believe that West Virginia needs to work, Washington needs to work for us, and the way to get Washington working for us is to elect a United States Senator that will get rid of the obstructionism of Harry Reid, the agenda of President Obama. I look forward to discussing these issues with Secretary Tennant in this debate tonight, and thank you very much. And I want to thank the Clay Center as well.
Congresswoman Capito, thank you. Secretary Tennant, your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Hoppy, and thank you, Congresswoman Capito, for being here too. And most importantly, thank you to all of you at home for tuning in tonight, because this race is about you. The Congresswoman wants you to believe, as you just heard, that this race is about Washington politicians. But I'm here to tell you that this race is about West Virginia. Not President Obama, not Harry Reid. They are not on the ballot. I'm on the ballot, and Congresswoman Capito is running against me. So every time you hear the Congresswoman say something about Harry Reid or Barack Obama, I want you to ask yourself, what is she hiding? Well, she's hiding the votes that she has taken that hurt you. You know me. You know that I grew up on a farm, the youngest of 7 kids in Marion County, where we had 9 people in a house with 1 bathroom. And you know my record too. You know that I will stand up to politics as usual in Washington, just as I have done in Charleston as Secretary of State. In 2010, when 3 Democratic elected officials tried to steal an election, I led the investigation that put them behind bars. That's right, 3 members of my own party in prison because I don't answer to a party, I answer to the people of West Virginia. And I saved money. I cut my budget, I saved $3 million and gave it back to the taxpayers of West Virginia. Now, I gave money back to the taxpayers while the Congresswoman voted to give taxpayer dollars to CEOs on Wall Street. That's right, she voted twice to give bonuses to CEOs while we were bailing out those banks. That's the difference in this race. I am proud to be endorsed by Senator Joe Manchin, Senator Jay Rockefeller, the United Mine Workers of America, the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce, West Virginia teachers, and AFL-CIO. I know what it's like to work a minimum wage job. I know what it's like to run a small business. I know what it's like to send a husband to war, and I'm asking to be your voice in the United States Senate.
Thanks, Secretary Tennant. Candidates, thank you for your opening remarks. By agreement of the candidates, the remainder of this evening's debate will focus on questions posed to each candidate on a rotating basis. Each candidate has 90 seconds to respond to questions posed by me, with the candidate not receiving the question having an opportunity for a 60-second rebuttal. There will be 2 opportunities per candidate to pose a 30-second challenge to the rebuttal. This challenge cannot be challenged and will be the final words from the candidates before we move on to the next question. Secretary Tennant will get our first question of the evening.
Yes.
Secretary Tennant, one of your ads famously turns off the lights at the White House, saying you're going to push back against the president and the EPA on coal. And we've heard similar messages from the governor, now Senator Joe Manchin, Congressman Ray Hall, who's a senior Democrat in the House, Governor Tomlin, all office holders, all Democrats, many of them with senior status. Why should West Virginians believe that you will be successful as a new person in Washington where Manchin, Ray Hall, and Tomlin, members of your own party, have not been successful?
Well, Hoppy, thank you for that question. And I did have that commercial, and it got some attention from a lot of folks, including the president. And that's what it was meant to do. Because whether the president believes it or not, coal is still 40% of the electricity in this country and more than 90% here in West Virginia. And I have been endorsed by the United Mine Workers of America, the coal miners. The coal miners endorse me because they trust me to help save their jobs. They know that I have a plan to save their jobs, and that's what I've done is challenge the president to invest the $8 billion that we have in the Department of Energy to have retrofitting our coal-fired power plants. That's one way to save our jobs. That's why the coal miners have endorsed me. They've also endorsed me because they know that I will stand up for their health, their safety, and their pensions. They know that Congresswoman Capito was the only member of the West Virginia delegation to vote against the Robert C. Byrd Coal Mine Safety Act. They know that she also voted to cut mine inspectors in a dangerous budget that she continues to vote for. The coal miners also endorse me because they know that I will stand up to the EPA, just as I did a couple months ago when I marched through the streets with 6,000 UMWA workers and electrical workers showing our voices and marching against the EPA and President Obama. And that's how I'm going to make a difference, Hoppy.
Congresswoman Capito, your response, 60 seconds.
My response is that my opponent has supported the president that's putting West Virginians out of jobs. And that's exactly what she would do when she would go to Washington. She supported him twice in his election. She gave money to his inauguration. Mrs. Obama says that we need Secretary Tennant to continue the president's agenda on health care and guns, and certainly coal as well. So I don't think that while she went to Washington to try to talk to the EPA and came home and the explanation was we have a failure to communicate. I'll stand strong on my record of defending West Virginia coal. We have passed bill after bill out of the House, and the obstructionism of President Obama and Harry Reid, who supports my opponent's campaign, stops us at every point. And the only way to change this is to change our voice in the Senate, is to elect a senator who created the Coal Caucus, who stands up, who stood for miners in the Miner Act, Mine Safety Act, and who knows that this administration is out to destroy us and our jobs.
Congresswoman Capito, the next question is to you. You have repeatedly assailed, as you just did, the Obama administration and talked about the job-killing regulations that are imposed. Figures from the West Virginia University Bureau of Business Economic Research show that in 2000, the year you were first elected to the House, West Virginia was 49th in per capita income. That same agency reports in 2013, we're still 49th. Now, you blame the EPA and this administration, but hasn't there been economic stagnation that's occurred under Democrat and Republican administrations and during your term? So why should West Virginians believe 6 years in the Senate will be different than your 14 years in the Congress?
Well, I think, Hoppy, that you have to account for the last 6 years where the president and his policies have absolutely riddled our economy here in West Virginia. We've lost 7,000 coal mining jobs. And if you do the multiplier effect that Cecil Roberts himself from the UMWA uses, of 4 jobs for every coal mining jobs, that's 28,000 West Virginians who are out of work. Talk to the alpha miners who got the WARN notice. That's 1,000 coal miners who have lost their jobs. So, I think that when we see the policies that have moved forward, we have a health care bill that is moving us to a part-time economy. 63% of those part-time jobs are women. Our salaries are going down. Our expendable energy, our expendable dollars are going down. I mean, we're spending more on energy, more on health care, more uncertainty because of the policies that my opponent supports, that President Obama supports. Now, you know, I can't sit here and say everything was rosy for the first 8 years, but certainly these devastated West Virginia, and it concerns me greatly.
Secretary Tennant, rebuttal?
Yes, Hoppy, thank you. You know, Congresswoman Capito said in her opening statement, these are her words, "We need a Washington that works for us." Well, you're darn tootin', we need a Washington that works for us. She's been there for 14 years. That's why it's time to send me to the United States Senate. And as Congresswoman sits here and tells you what she'll do, well, what has she done for the last 14 years? You know, the coal miners know and are behind me in this race, Hoppy. They have endorsed me, the United Mine Workers of America, because they know that I will stand up for them. When she talks about these coal miners, does she talk to them and say that she has hurt them, she has hurt their safety by voting against a Coal Mine Safety Act in the wake of the UBB tragedy in 2010, that she has voted to cut funding to the black lung benefits, $1 million, hurting more than 2,000 coal miners. And how about Patriot Coal? When Patriot Coal filed for bankruptcy, the coal miners rallied. I stood shoulder to shoulder with those retirees trying to fight for their health care benefits and their pensions. And where was Congresswoman Capito? She wasn't standing up beside the coal miners. She was going behind their backs and taking checks from the Patriot executives, the same ones who were trying to slash their pensions. So I will stand for the coal miners, and Congresswoman Capito has not stood up for the coal miners because the most important part of coal is the coal miner.
Congresswoman Capito would like to use one of her two challenges.
Yes, I would, because I think this is a myth that my opponent keeps pushing forward onto the media and otherwise. Let's start with black lung. I have been a supporter of the black lung. I'm alarmed at the increase in black lung that was discovered in the last study, and I've been very supportive. I joined with Senator Manchin, Congressman Rahal, Congressman McKinley to convince the President Obama, who was going to cut the $1 million from the black lung program, the President that my opponent has supported was going to cut the black lung program. I joined with my fellow colleagues to do that.
Okay. Let me continue on the economic front, and let me get into regulations, leadership, and the impact on the state's economy. Secretary Tennant, the question is for you. In an ad you ran last week statewide, which you approved, the announcer says, quote, on the Financial Services Committee, where Congresswoman Capito sits, she helps bankers get rich. The ad goes on to say, while West Virginians were losing their jobs to Wall Street, she gave her husband, a Wall Street banker, inside tips, and they made more than $100,000. You've said that Capito personally benefited from her position in Congress. What precisely did Capito do as a member of Congress to enrich herself and her husband? And are you implying that Congresswoman Capito is corrupt?
I am saying that Congresswoman Capito broke the trust of West Virginians, because this is what this is about. This is about the trust that the people of West Virginia deserve to have in their elected officials. Now, Congresswoman Capito serves on a committee that is supposed to oversee banks, at the same time protect customers and consumers at the same time. And the Charleston Gazette had the headline right out in black and white where it says that whether they're large or small, Capito tends to side with banks. Well, that's breaking the trust of West Virginians, because if she's siding with banks, then she's not siding with West Virginians. And even Politico magazine stated that Wall Street lobbyists say that Congresswoman Capito is their go-to person. Well, who is your go-to person? I'll be your go-to person. I'll stand up for you and your families, and I will fight for the kind of future that you want for your children.
Just a point of clarification, which I do have the ability to do. Did she and her husband, as you said, personally benefit from her position in Congress?
Yes, from our own financial filings, you can see that she made money. Because here's the point, and here's the fact. The Congresswoman will agree on this, because Congress has access to information that regular West Virginians don't have access to. And the fact is that during the financial crisis, West Virginians were losing their retirement, they were losing their savings and their homes, and Congresswoman Capito was making money.
Congresswoman Capito, your response?
Well, these kind of personal attacks that are unfounded, untrue, undocumented, and unable to have any kind of factual basis. Supposedly, the person that she's using as her factual basis says, I wasn't at the supposed meeting and I didn't have insider information. This is just a desperate attack by a desperate candidate who wants to shift the conversation away from jobs, education, health care, energy, all the things that West Virginians are tuning in tonight to talk about. And so I'm just not surprised, because I understand that she'll do anything and say anything to get elected. You want to talk about trust. I've built 18 years of trust with West Virginians. They know me. They know my family. I don't appreciate my family being attacked. That's not a West Virginia value. And I'm going to stand up and fight that. And I just think that the personal attacks are just despicable. And I would like to ask the Secretary tonight if she would stop with the nasty personal attacks and let's talk about the issues.
Congresswoman,
may I use a challenge?
You can use a challenge, sure.
I can use a challenge, I think so. Thank you very much. Well, first off, what is she talking about, a meeting that she's talking about? I never mentioned a meeting, so I'm not sure, there's no mention of a meeting in my ad. And I'm not sure what she's talking about, but I think she just confirmed that Congress has access that West Virginians don't have access to. And the Center for Public Integrity called you Wall Street's secret weapon. Wall Street's secret weapon. And sure, you want to stop the personal ads? I believe that you were the one who began the personal ads back in July.
Okay, so Congresswoman Capito, let me put the next question to you. Your opponent has criticized you, as we've just heard, of being too cozy with the banks and the financial industry. And you counter by saying you voted against the bank bailout twice. However, you voted against the Pay for Performance Act of 2009 that was aimed at controlling what many believe were the excessive bonuses that bankers received while they were getting taxpayer bailout money. Why should financial companies that made poor decisions and then were saved by the taxpayers be able to reward bad behavior with big bonuses?
Well, I want to point out that when the big banks came knocking, I voted no twice. I was the only member of the West Virginia delegation that voted no twice to the big banks to say no bailout. And I have been fighting this in committee, too big to fail. We cannot bail out financial institutions. I also voted to tax any bonus that may possibly come forward at 90%. The bill that you're talking about and the statements that I made at the time was a very broad-based bill, not just executives that are getting bonus, but you know, somebody in a local office that might be an administrative person would be penalized. Well, I didn't think that was fair. They had no bearings in the Wall Street debacle. But you know what I'm going to defend? I'm going to defend the West Virginia community banks and the West Virginia credit unions. We need to have a full financial system here in the state that doesn't include big banks, that includes ability to get a car, to get a mortgage, to afford to go to school. All these things, I've looked out for our community banks and our credit unions in West Virginia, and I'll stand by that because that's important to West Virginia.
Secretary Tennant, your response?
Well, Congresswoman Capito says that she voted twice against the bailout. She's correct about that when they came knocking, she voted against the bailout. But they kept coming, Hoppy. And they kept coming and they knocked again. And not only did she open the door, she left the door wide open and voted twice to give our taxpayers' dollars to those CEOs in the form of those bonuses. Now that's a distinction here. I saved taxpayers' money. I gave back $3 million and gave it back to the taxpayers while the Congresswoman is giving money to the CEOs. And here are West Virginians. Let's talk about West Virginians. West Virginians are suffering. They deserve a pay raise too. They deserve a little bonus also. Why don't we increase minimum wage? I'm for increasing minimum wage for the West Virginia workers and not worry about the profits before our West Virginia workers, the profits of Wall Street before our West Virginia workers.
Secretary Tennant, next question's to you. You have argued for expanded unemployment benefits. You issued a release last April when the Senate voted to restore federal federal funding for extended jobless benefits. You said in your words, economic experts agree that extending unemployment insurance would be a boon for the economy, generating economic growth and increasing consumer spending. If that's true, if the economic principles behind that argument are solid, why not extend jobless benefits for even longer to even more people and generate even more economic growth? What's the economic principle behind your argument?
Well, first off, when you talk about unemployed West Virginians, I think about unemployed West Virginians, and I think about the ORMET workers, those in the northern panhandle who lost their jobs. The company was over, the business was over right across the river, but in Wetzel County, a lot of the employees and the impact that it has on the economy in West Virginia. So I think about our unemployed. I am worried about our coal miners who've received those warrant notices. And so ORMET folks lost their job out of no fault of their own. They worked with the company, they worked with the union, they tried to keep their jobs and tried to keep it going. So they've lost their jobs. And so what they need now is a little help while they are trying to look for other jobs. And you are right, it is an economic boost. It's estimated that it would bring $20 million to the economy of West Virginia, but Congresswoman Capito has blocked that. I mean, we have 16,000 West Virginians who could use the unemployment extended insurance while they are looking for jobs. And then comes the next step. Well, let's help create jobs. Let's create good paying jobs. And we certainly have all the possibilities to do that with our energy resources that we have, and the research and the technology and our manufacturing know-how. And that's why I'm running to help support and put the high-tech manufacturing that we have in our community and technical colleges to work.
Congresswoman Capito?
Well, when I think about unemployed workers, I think about the over 7,000 coal miners who are out of a job. I think about the rail workers. I think about the shop workers. I think about the electrician, the tire manufacturer. This is directly attributable. Every single mining job that's lost is attributable to the policies of President Obama, Harry Reid, who are supporting my opponent's election. She may say the president's not on the ballot, but guess what the president said the other day? He said point blank, every single one of my policies is on the ballot. So who is his representative on the ballot? The secretary. And I believe that West Virginians that are out of work know that, and they're going to vote like that in November.
Congresswoman Capito, you in your career supported raising the minimum wage at times. President Obama, in his State of the Union address earlier this year, called for a higher minimum wage, and you said in response, I believe Congress should debate whether the minimum wage should be raised again. In 2013, you joined fellow Republicans in voting against Congressman Miller's proposal to raise the minimum wage to $10.10. Do you support or oppose raising the minimum wage to $10.10?
I'm not sure that vote, I'll have to check on that because I don't think we've had a direct vote on raising the minimum wage. I did vote in 2007 to raise the minimum wage. I believe in a healthy minimum wage, absolutely. It's not meant to be a wage to raise your families and create a life for a family, but I believe that we need to look at the ramifications of raising the minimum wage. The state of West Virginia just took it upon themselves to do a three-part, I think it's the three-part gradual raising of the minimum wage, I believe, to maybe over $8.75, maybe $8.75. And I think that's a good start. I think that studies show that if you raise the minimum wage, you could cost as many as 500,000 jobs. I don't think we're in an economy where we can cost ourselves 500,000 jobs. I did say that I believe we should debate this on the House floor, and I think I would look favorably upon raising the minimum wage.
Secretary Tennant, your response.
Well, Hoppy, up on the farm, we are always taught that actions speak louder than words. And you're going to see a lot of this tonight from Congresswoman Capito saying something here, but her votes have said something different in Washington. And right here, she says it, in this vote for minimum wage, I will vote for an increase in minimum wage to $10.10 an hour because West Virginians deserve that. She wants to give bonuses to our taxpayer dollars, to bonuses to CEOs on Wall Street. I want to give minimum wage increases to our working families because you can't survive on $15,000 a year. That's how much you make right now if you're working a 40-hour work week, and that is not right for West Virginians who work so hard. And you know, Congresswoman says, yes, we should have a debate. Well, certainly we should have a debate, And what's Congress doing right now? They are sitting at their another vacation. Congress is on a 6-week vacation. For what? To campaign? I don't know, but they just came off another 5-week vacation earlier this summer. So certainly we deserve a debate. We deserve Congress to get to work and debate this for the people of this country.
Let's move on to foreign policy and defense. Secretary Tenet, President Obama has ordered U.S. military campaign against the Islamic State that includes bombing targets in Iraq and Syria and arming the Free Syrian Army in order to degrade and destroy ISIS. You said in an interview with me, I'm not for boots on the ground. If the threat becomes greater, which is very possible, and you're in the Senate, you may be called upon to vote whether to send young West Virginians into battle. Can you define as accurately as possible your line in the sand at which point you would support sending troops from West Virginia across the country into harm's way?
Hoppy, I have said that I do support whatever efforts it takes to keep America safe by using the fewest number of Americans, by putting the fewest number of Americans in harm. But I'm not ready to put boots on the ground because I don't believe we have exhausted all of our resources and all of our options, rather, not our resources, but all of our options in this. And, you know, as a wife who has sent a husband to war, I know that when we talk about boots on the ground, our national security, the bedrock to our national security is the men and women who serve in uniform. And so, you know, we can have all the technology in the world that we want, but our men and women in uniform are the basis for our national security. And, you know, I would like to mention tonight that we've already had our first fatality in this war on ISIS with Corporal Jordan Spears, who we lost when his aircraft lost power. So that is a tragic reminder that airstrikes or boots on the ground, it's still our men and women in uniform that we must be standing up and debating. Because you're right, you're asking me for a definite line in the sand. Well, that's not an easy answer, and that's why there should be a debate taking place in Congress for the American people to be able to hear all of the information. And once I hear all that information, I'll be able to make that definite line in the sand answer.
Congresswoman Capito, your response.
Well, I mean, the visual of ISIS beheading 2 Americans and now threatening to behead another, and British journalists and aid workers is just jarring to all of us. And I think that because of the president's really weak policies in Iraq, we find ourselves in a position where this terrorist group has been fomenting and without raising money and raising membership. And I find it frightening in terms of what could happen on our homeland, and I think that has to be what you think about. I think the Secretary is right. There's nothing more valuable for us as Americans than our servicemen and women, and I appreciate her husband's service to our country. And so I take these decisions very seriously. I did vote to arm to have the president train the Syrian rebels because I feel like we need a coalition of people that are to go in and basically stop this terrorist group from further growth.
Let's move on to health care and the Affordable Care Act. Congresswoman Capito, the House has voted over 4 dozen times to revamp, repeal, or tweak that law. I counted at least 5 times you voted with the Republican majority in the House for outright repeal. Today, because of ACA, there are about 140,000 additional West Virginians who have health care through Medicaid. Another 20,000 have insurance through the exchange. Would you vote again today to repeal ACA, which would mean those 160,000 West Virginians would lose their insurance?
What I would vote for is to repeal and replace. I voted for that 50 times, but I also recognize that the ACA has some very good things about it. First of all, making sure people don't get cut off their insurance for a pre-existing condition. Absolutely for that. Was for that before the president decided to take it in a larger and much more detrimental direction. I believe keeping our students on until they're 26. I think that's a good thing. So there are good things. So we need to keep what's good, replace it with what will work. Get rid of a business mandate. Make sure that our businesses are not having a 30% increase in their premiums, which we're seeing. 7,000 West Virginians have lost their health care plan because remember the president, who I'll remind you, my opponent supported and supports his policies and his health care policy, said, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, period. Well, that didn't work out so well. So, you know, it was sold as a bill of goods, basically. We're hearing people who are losing their physicians, whose deductibles have gone up into the thousands of dollars. It's unaffordable. And so were there things wrong? Yes, with the healthcare system. I wish we'd worked together. I wish we'd worked in a bipartisan way to find a way to keep folks who are on insurance now, the 140,000 Medicaid, we want to keep them insured because that's important to us, not just to them, but it's important to us as a state.
Secretary Tennant, your response?
Well, there she goes again. I wish that she says one thing and votes another way. She says she's for all of these things in the ACA, but yet she has voted to repeal it. Hoppy, I won't vote to repeal it because I know what it's like to go without health care. My daughter Delaney had open heart surgery when she was a week old, and many folks across West Virginia prayed for her, and those prayers were answered because that surgery saved her life. She's a healthy, happy 12-year-old right now. But when my husband and I started our small business, we wanted to buy insurance. So he called, and I can remember the day I came home, and he said, Natalie, I talked to the insurance companies trying to get insurance for us and the business and the family. And he said they would cover me and you, but they wouldn't cover Delaney because of her pre-existing condition. I was devastated because I thought, what parent takes something that their child can't have? So I will never go back to the days when insurance companies can deny insurance for someone with a pre-existing condition. For Congresswoman Capito to sit here and say that she's for that too, but she's voted to take that away.
Thank you. Social Security. We know the problems that Social Security faces, Secretary Tennant. And in an interview with the Dominion Post, you said you favor raising the cap, currently $1,117, on income taxable for Social Security to make the program solvent. A 2014 CBO report said if you raised the payroll cap to $240,000, it would help, but you still wouldn't eliminate the actuarial imbalance. So that's an enormous tax increase. So do you support more than doubling the cap on the taxable income? And if not, what specific measures do you support to try to make Social Security solvent again?
Hoppy, I am supportive of raising the cap to $240,000, not quite that far yet, and we'll work on a number. Another way that we can keep Social Security solvent is quite simply raise minimum wage, because if you have more people getting paid, they're going to pay into Social Security more. But I will tell you this right now, and I'll look at the people of West Virginia and I'll look into your eyes and this is what I'll tell you that I won't do for Social Security. I will not privatize your Social Security. I won't take your Social Security and put it in the hands of those on Wall Street so they could gamble it away. That's not very secure, and imagine what would have happened had that been done like Congresswoman Capito wanted to do before the financial crisis. Now, she will sit here and tell you that she has never wanted to privatize Social Security and that she doesn't want to do it now. But most recently, as 2011, Congresswoman Capito voted to keep the option on the table for privatizing Social Security. Remember what I learned on the farm? Actions speak louder than words. Well, votes speak louder than words too. And her votes indicate that she would take Social Security and she would privatize it and hurt the security for our seniors in West Virginia. I will protect it and I will help to strengthen it.
Congresswoman Capito, your response.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think this is just an attack to scare seniors in terms of Social Security. I've been in office for 14 years. I have opposed privatizing Social Security on down the line. Congressman Hoyer, a leader in the Democrat Party, when he wrote to President Bush in 2004, he said Republicans are against privatizing, like Congresswoman Shelley Moore Capito. So that's the plain truth on the privatization. I do believe we should bust the cap on the Social Security taxes, and I'd be willing to take it up over the 200,000 number that Hoppy mentioned. We've got to find solution here. If we don't, you know, I have younger children. Secretary has a younger child. There's going to be no Social Security for those. We have got to lay down the arms here, work together as Republicans and Democrats, and solve a difficult problem, because in 2037, Social Security is going bust. And for those workers now, that are working towards that in their future. It's going to be a difficult future if we don't have the promises made, are the promises kept, and I'll keep the promise of Social Security.
Let me segue into Medicare. Congresswoman Capito, earlier this year, the Republican-controlled House passed the Paul Ryan budget. You voted for that budget. That plan had a number of reforms to entitlement spending. The Wall Street Journal reported Mr. Ryan also called for overhauling Medicare to allow Americans who turned 65 on or after January 1st, 2014 to choose between private insurance plans with government-supported premiums or staying on traditional Medicare, though their costs could rise. So do you support, through that budget, at least a partial privatization of Medicare?
What I support is reforming Medicare and keeping Medicare for not just the generation that's on Medicare right now, but for future generations. Many of you know I've been facing this in my own family in terms of trying to help senior care with my parents. And I believe that the wrong way to go is the way the president has gone through the ACA, Obamacare, that my opponent has supported, where there's a $700 billion cut to Medicare. Thousands of West Virginians have lost their Medicare Advantage option. Our home health care system, which is exceedingly important to our seniors through Medicare, is being cut by $700 billion. That, to me, is inexcusable. And that's what Secretary Tenet has supported. What I think we need to do is to look at, and the budget that you're talking about gives the options for seniors to stay in traditional Medicare. If that's what you like, you can stay in traditional Medicare, and that's fine. If you want to look at another option, maybe we ought to look at other options for future generations. This is not for anybody that's 55 or older. It's for the younger generation. Again, our children and grandchildren, there's going to be no Medicare if we don't lay down the arms, stop the name calling and the scare tactics, and really face the problem. And the problem is there's not enough of working people to support the baby boomer generation, like you and I are, that are going to be into the Medicare system before we know it.
Secretary Tenet?
Hoppy, there is no one more serious about cutting a budget than I am. I've proved that, and I've given money back to the taxpayers of West Virginia. But I will not balance a budget off the backs of seniors, as Congresswoman Capito has done. Budgets are about priorities. My priority is West Virginia. Her priority, as she has shown time and time again, is Wall Street. Now, she talks about Medicare, and she talks a good game, but the fact is that those dangerous budgets that she voted for 4 times cut and make Medicare, gut Medicare, and make it a voucher program where she's handing over a coupon to our seniors and say, you're on your own when it comes to buying insurance with insurance companies. Now, don't take my word for it. Take the Alliance for Retired Americans. Take their word for it. This is the record, the lifetime score that they give for Congresswoman Capito. She talks about being on the side of seniors, but certainly not. She has a lifetime score of 18% for our seniors. Right there's the proof.
Secretary Tenet, next question is for you. The state Supreme Court recently ruled 5-0 that the State Election Commission, which you're a member of, erred in not allowing the Republican Party to fill a vacancy on the House of Delegates ballot. Justice Minnis Ketchum said the commission blatantly ignored the law. Justice Alan Loffrey said the actions of the commission, as well as the state's chief election official, you, is both disturbing and unconscionable. Why should West Virginians have faith in your leadership in the Senate when, according to 2 state Supreme Court justices, you and your office failed to correctly interpret the law in this matter?
Hoppy, I first want to make clear that I have stepped up. Our office has absorbed the cost of reprinting the ballots, and the ballots are now getting out in the hands of the voters in the appropriate district, in the 35th district. Now, as you said, and as you read there this was a decision from the 5-member bipartisan group of the State Election Commission, of which the chairman is a Republican. And we looked at the evidence. We looked at the evidence that was out before us. We studied it. We questioned. We debated. We asked questions to those who chose to come to the SEC meeting. And we made a decision based on the evidence that we had. And as you read, the Supreme Court said that we did not get it right, and so we got back to work. We got to work, and we corrected the problem, and the Secretary of State's office and the SEC will absorb the cost of those ballots. Now, what I have done as Secretary of State is I have been a good steward of the money for the people of West Virginia. I've cut my budget, I've saved money and given $3 million back to the taxpayers of West Virginia. I have cut fees for businesses to make doing business in West Virginia a whole lot easier. I have made it easier for our military members to be able to vote when they are deployed, and I have aggressively gone after election fraud when we have seen it and we have investigated it.
Congresswoman Capito, your response?
You know, when you're asking for a promotion, the first thing people want to know is how have you done in your last job? The Supreme Court basically told the Secretary of State, who's the chief elections officer of the state, that she got it wrong, blatantly wrong. And it was obvious it was for political reasons. And so now she's saying that the ballots are going to be reprinted and she's going to absorb the cost. Where does she get her budget? That's the taxpayers. So, you know, I mean, I just am astounded at the explanation. Basically what I would say, we made a mistake, we're going over. We're reprinting the ballots, it's October. So I don't think it's been treated fairly. And if you talk about using the office and the competence, let's talk about putting Social Security numbers on your website. Let's talk about putting a conference call number on your website that ran up a bill of over $400,000 to the taxpayers. Let's talk about reprinting ballots. This is not the first time we've had to reprint our ballots. Your job is the chief elections officer, and you're getting it wrong. So I don't know why West Virginians would think that that's a reason to promote you to the United States Senate.
You want to use one of your challenges?
Sure, I would, unless you're just going to let me answer that.
Go ahead. 30 seconds, Secretary, for a challenge.
Thank you so much. You know, Congresswoman Capito is just throwing out a whole lot of numbers there and hoping that some of them stick. The number you need to remember is $3 million, and that's what I gave back to the taxpayers. She talks about a conference call. She doesn't have her facts right. She's just purposefully misleading you as citizens. The conference call she's talking about was from the Board of Physical Therapy. And I have a letter here, Congresswoman, and I'll give it to you. It's a letter from AT&T, and it says that that conference call was their fault, and they are paying the bill. So the people of West Virginia never paid it, and here is that information.
Okay.
Did you want to give it to her?
I'll hang on till the end of the debate, and I'll pass it along. Okay. This would go to, where do you? All right, Congresswoman Capito. In January 2011, there was a mass shooting in Tucson that killed 6 people and wounded 14 others, including a then fellow member of Congress, Gabby Giffords. The attacker, Jarrett Lee Loeffner, used a Glock 19 with a high-capacity magazine containing 30 rounds. The NRA opposes any restrictions on capacity magazines. You have an A rating from the NRA in their endorsement. Do you support their position on this? And if so, can you make an argument for why an individual has a right to buy a high-capacity magazine?
I do support that, and I'm happy to have their endorsement. West Virginia is a Second Amendment state. I'm a believer in the Second Amendment, and that reflected in that endorsement. I know Gabby Giffords. I served with her, and she's a remarkable individual to have recovered from that. And I know she is. She's working hard every day to get back as much health as she can. So best wishes to her and to her husband. You know where I think the main problem is basically the mental health system in this country. We saw that at Newtown. We saw that in Arizona, where the mental health system has failed us tremendously. That's why I've worked with my fellow members of Congress to try to get a mental health system that makes sure that those who shouldn't have access to firearms, that are in the mental health system, should be disallowed from ever having access to anything, any kind of firearm. That we need to make sure that that is coordinated with all of the different background checks and other things that we do. We've seen that at the Virginia Tech shooting, where that guy was in the mental health system as well, but fell through the cracks. We can't keep going like that. Congressman Murphy in Pennsylvania and I have worked hard to make sure that we're coordinating the mental health system to make sure that these types of incidents don't happen again.
Secretary Tennant, your response?
Hoppy, I think that if you're a law-abiding citizen, you should be able to purchase a weapon. Of course, we want to keep guns out of the hand of terrorists, criminals, and those who have been deemed mentally incompetent. You know, I grew up like so many West Virginians. I grew up on a farm surrounded by guns with my brothers going hunting and shooting with them, and of course being the mountaineer and having a muzzleloader myself that I use quite frequently now and keep it around. And so, you know, I don't need the NRA and many West Virginians will certainly agree that they don't necessarily need an outside group to tell them how they stand with guns. Because I represent the Second Amendment, I am strong in saying that West Virginians have a right to have their guns if they are law-abiding citizens. And I myself have a concealed weapons permit and have guns of my own at home.
Let me continue on the gun track, and Secretary Tenet, I'll ask you this question. Senator Manchin's proposed gun control legislation that, among other things, expands background checks for sales at gun shows and over the internet. You said in an interview with MSNBC earlier this year you had questions about the bill. You wanted to get the pulse of West Virginians. Well, you've been out on the campaign trail, so you've talked to a lot of people. So now, do you support or oppose the Manchin bill?
Well, I've said that I have opposed the Manchin-Toomey bill because West Virginians should be making the choice of what they want to happen in West Virginia.
Okay. Any response to that?
Well, I oppose the bill. I've opposed it all the way through. I believe the Secretary's had a change of heart here most recently on that bill, but I've been consistently opposed to that bill.
Let me move on to immigration and talk about some issues there. Congresswoman Capito, you've called for securing the border first, then dealing with illegals second. So if that happens, then the issue of illegals still exists. Do you support any sort of pathway to citizenship for folks in this country illegally?
I do not support amnesty, plain and simple. I believe that it is incumbent upon us to secure our borders before we move forward into any other comprehensive immigration plan. I think particularly where we see what's happening with ISIS, we don't know who's coming through our borders. We don't know what kind of folks are coming into the United States, and until we secure that border and until we're satisfied that that border is secure, I don't think we can do an immigration plan. Harry Reid says the border's secure. So, Harry Reid, supports my opponent. So she probably feels the same way as well. I feel that, we have the children coming over from the 3 countries, a horrible humanitarian crisis. I mean, my heart aches. I mean, I'm a mother or a grandmother. It's just unconscionable to me, but we need to reunite these children with their families and make sure that they're moved through the system in as a humane way as possible. But the illegal immigration is costing our resources, it's costing our health care, it's costing our penal system, prison system. I mean, it is just a drain on the American economy. And so I believe by securing the borders, we can then, I think, look at further immigration reform.
Secretary Tenet?
She's right about all of that, Hoppy. And my question to Congresswoman Capito and statement is, then get to work. Get to work and get this passed, because there was a bipartisan bill that passed the United States Senate addressing immigration, and it's held up in the House of Representatives. Now, was it a perfect piece of legislation? It certainly addressed it. It was bipartisan, voted on by Senator Joe Manchin, and it is a start. It might not be perfect, but it is a start. And she has held that up. And every time that she refuses to vote on that, she is for amnesty, because the 12 million undocumented immigrants who are already in this country are having amnesty as we speak. So here's what we need to do. We need to address this piece of legislation that was bipartisan and worked on so hard by so many senators. But first off, we have to secure the borders. We must secure the borders. We must make those who are in this country get to the back of the line, learn English, and pay taxes.
Secretary Tenet, a July 2014 article in the Gazette said that internet speeds for Frontier, which covers most of the state, meet federal and state standards for minimum speed only 12% of the time. West Virginia lags in both speed and availability of high-speed internet compared with most of the country, according to numerous studies. Internet is vital to the creation of new business. Does the federal government have a role in expanding internet in West Virginia? And if so, what would you do to try to secure funding to expand broadband, and where would that money come from?
Well, Hoppy, that's an interesting question because, yes, internet is so important, especially for the rural parts of our state and especially for job creation as well. And we're seeing that we had this opportunity with the stimulus money that we had, and we need to continue to work on the lines that have been put through and continue to add not just the middle mile, but let's finish the whole mile all the way through. Now, when you talk about job creation, you're exactly right. When we're talking about businesses, small businesses especially. Just last week, John Deskins, who is the WVU economist, said that our job creation is going to come through small businesses here in West Virginia. And I am a small business owner, and so I look through the eyes of a small business owner in making decisions, and that's why I cut fees in the Secretary of State's office. Now compare that to what Congresswoman Capito has done. She has championed and has written legislation to raise swipe fees on our businesses. Now, what's a swipe fee? Every time you have a credit card or a debit card and it's used, there is a charge associated with it. And it is either the customer who is paying it or the business that is paying it. And as I travel around the state, I've talked to businesses, whether it's the burrito shop in Tucker County or down in Lewis County. These are some of the words I hear. It's terrible. It's killing us. It's our worst enemy. Now, those are coming from small businesses. Congresswoman Capito championed this increase. Wells Fargo spent $6 million lobbying to raise those fees. She sided with Wall Street and Wells Fargo. I will side with our small businesses and job creation.
Congresswoman, a rebuttal?
Well, I'm going to answer the question. I don't know how we got from internet to swipe fees. I guess that was in a pre-debate talking point, but I'll say that we need broadband, I'm deeply disappointed. First of all, the $1 trillion stimulus did not result in any job creation, and we saw what happened with some of the internet broadband money that came into West Virginia. We bought routers that nobody's using, and it was a giant overkill into an area that hasn't been able to be used. Small businesses could probably use that, but it was unusable. So I mean, I think that when I was in Cape and Bridge, which is in Hampshire County, they don't have hardly any connectivity. So how are you going to draw people from the DC area into this area for job creation if you don't have the connectivity? This is one of my, the infrastructures of tomorrow that we have to have, or actually we need it today. And this is one of my passions for the next several years.
Congresswoman Capito, both you and your opponent have spoken out repeatedly against the EPA's regulations on carbon emissions. The EPA and the Obama administration say they're trying to reduce carbon emissions and get other countries to follow suit to save the planet. A recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change concluded, according to the New York Times, that ice caps are melting, water supplies are coming under stress, heat waves and heavy rains are intensifying, coral reefs are dying. Do you believe these scientists are simply wrong? And if they're not wrong, if they're correct, don't we have an obligation to do something about it?
Well, I think that weaving a balance between the economy and the environment is always difficult, and we're faced with it here in West Virginia because we are so heavily blessed with the natural resources that power this country. But the EPA overreach in this administration is unbelievable. The new clean air for the existing coal-fired power plants, not one power plant in the state meets those parameters set out by the president, who my opponent supports his policies, so she must support this. And I think that, so what are we supposed to do? Let's have something that makes sense. Let's have technologies that are actually reachable and affordable. And let's, the president says we need to lead on this. Well, if the president's leading the globe on this issue, and China and India and Japan and all of the other nations are not following, then he's just taking a walk. And he's taking a walk at the expense of the men and women in the West Virginia coal fields. 7,000 jobs and more to come. This is a travesty. We have got to stop this. That's what this election's about.
For point of clarification, do you think the scientists are wrong?
I don't necessarily think the climate's changing, no. But I think we have to find a balance and a way to address this without hurting the heartland of this country, without hurting West Virginians and West Virginia families.
There's rebuttal.
Hoppy, I have listened to the scientists. I know that there is a consensus, and I don't disagree with them. At the same time, I don't think that we need to choose between clean air and clean coal, and or clean air and good-paying jobs, rather, because I know that we have the technology that can meet the demands, and that's why I have challenged the President. I've challenged the EPA. We have the National Energy Technology Lab in Morgantown that can develop carbon capture storage, CCS. I've challenged the President to use the $8 billion that's in the Department of Energy in guaranteed loans, that instead of using them as loans, take the money, directly invest, and have this technology that's going to save our jobs and that's going to have technology use around the world that will make coal more competitive. And that's why the United Mine Workers have endorsed me. They've looked at me in this race where the coal miners know that I will save their jobs.
I'm going to ask this question, and we have about 3 minutes left in the program. I'm going to ask each of you maybe to give me a 1-minute response on this if you can. Last year, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a section of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act that prohibited recognition of same-sex marriage. Since then, we've had all these court decisions, one just yesterday, a non-decision decision, that's essentially paving the way for same-sex marriages in West Virginia. I think both of you oppose same-sex marriage, but Secretary Tennant, let me start with you, 60 seconds, maybe a little bit less. Do you support or oppose same-sex marriage, and does what's happening with the courts change your opinion at all?
You know, Hoppy, I have thought about this, truly thought about this and prayed about this. And, you know, I think about how do I want to be treated? And I try to live by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And how do I want to be treated? I want to be treated equally and fairly. And I think that under the law, people should be treated equally and fairly. Now, does a church go against its doctrine? No, not at all. A church should not go against its doctrine, and it should not be forced to. But I think that we as West Virginians know about fairness, and we know about freedom. Mountaineers are always free.
So is that a support for same-sex marriage? It's
support for equality, and it's support for the law being equal under the law.
About 60 seconds.
Marriage.
Well, my voting record and my personal belief is that marriage is between a man and a woman. I have a long history on that, dating back from when I was in the West Virginia legislature. But I believe the decision that's been made is basically saying that the states will make their own decisions. And I will abide with what the state of West Virginia decides in this matter.
Okay. Well, listen, I want to thank you both very much. We appreciate you coming by. It was a spirited discussion. Congresswoman Capito, thank you. Good luck out on the campaign trail. And Secretary Tennant, thank you. Good luck on the campaign trail. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our debate here this evening. To the candidates, we want to thank them for their participation, and good luck to them in the final days of the campaign. Remember, the election day is coming up Tuesday, November 4th. Early voting begins Wednesday, October 22nd. AARP and the West Virginia Press Association and Metro News encourage you to exercise your right and cast your vote in this election. We also invite you to join us online for extended post-debate news coverage featuring a panel of state journalists and moderated by West Virginia Public Broadcasting's Ashton Mara. Online coverage begins immediately following our broadcast at wvmetronews.com and at wvpublic.org. wvmetronews.com and wvpublic.org. We again want to thank our hosts, our partners, the Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences. I'm Hoppy Kercheval. Thank you for joining us, and good night from Charleston.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.